Well, hello everyone, and thank you, Debbie, for inviting us to participate. This is a wonderful idea, and we really appreciate you working with our school board members across the state to be sure that they have all of the information that they need. I know this is very difficult times and a lot of hard decisions that have to be made, but it's good for us to stay in close communication with each other. I have with me today Dr. David Mathis. He's my left hand today. He's often my right hand. Dr. Mathis serves as one of the deputies here in college and career readiness, but has also handled most of the conversations, the review of your plans, and conversations with districts as we've moved forward to try to get our students back to 5 days a week as safely and as soon as possible. So I appreciate all your hard work. So here's our first question. What encouragement can you offer to school board members who, like you, are under a lot of pressure during a very difficult time? They feel the weight of ensuring the safety for all students and staff. They're being pressured by those who want districts to provide in-person instruction for all students, 5 days a week, no matter what, and those who are very concerned about requiring students and staff to return to normal as the pandemic continues. Well, I certainly understand this, and I know that as an elected official and as a former elected official, school board members have a really tough job because you're so close to the community and the decisions that you make affect every family. So I know you got a tough job. I would first say that you need to really balance your decision. First primary mission is to provide a safe learning environment for our students and staff. But we do have to realize that we've got to educate our students, and some districts are able to offer high quality virtual instruction at a higher level than others. So I think you have to look at your ability to serve the families in your community virtually. If it's not going well, that should probably push you to make different decisions and to get those students back in as soon as possible. You have a lot of families who are wanting to come back. I think it's really important for us to try to meet their needs and to offer at least two options, always the virtual option, and then additionally to offer some type of face-to-face instruction as soon as possible. And the other piece is, it took me a while to really see this and learn this, but there's no one piece of data, and the CDC and both DHEC back this up, and they say there's no one piece of data that should be used as the sole criteria for your decision making. We look to the disease activity chart by county, and certainly that tells us a lot, but you still have to balance what you're able to do, how many families want to come back, what your percentage of students back in the classroom, and how well you can maintain the wearing face masks, doing social distancing, contact tracing, washing hands, and really the testing that you need in your community. Anything I left out, David?
You got it.
Okay, well, why don't you read the second question?
The second question is, does every school district have a plan for how it will provide instruction to its students during the COVID-19 pandemic? And that's an easy answer, yes. All school districts, 79 of our school districts and 2 of our charter school districts submitted a plan to the agency for approval. All of the plans were submitted on time. All of the plans were approved for the start of the school year that included face-to-face, hybrid model, a virtual model. 6 staff members from the agency read each plan and made sure that they provided all platforms for all students. So I will say that in reading those plans, it was very evident as districts wrote their plans, they were very thoughtful.
Yeah.
They considered all the stakeholders in their communities to provide input. I think they were very transparent with their communication, their struggles and their goals of what they hoped to come out of this. And so I just applaud the districts for reaching beyond themselves to include stakeholders in the community for very effective plans.
Yeah, great. And one thing that I learned too, that I thought at first that all boards would have to vote and approve the plan, and that varied from district to district based on their policy. So some put that sole decision into the hands of the superintendent with working with the board, and other boards have to vote. So I learned in this process too. So our third question, in addition to the guidelines released by the Accelerate Ed Task Force to include social distancing requirements and implementation of safety precautions to protect against spreading the virus to staff and students, what other components should be included in each school district's plan? I think one of the things that we looked at is what are your protocols going to be? I had sent out and asked that each district require face masks. Instead of just highly encouraged, we went a step further with that because the research started coming in to show just how effective wearing masks, how that is the primary mitigation tool for this virus. So we do require face masks on all school buses and during the school day inside the buildings. We've given some flexibility to the district and, of course, classroom teachers if they need to remove the mask for a few minutes and that kind of thing. But we wanted to see your protocols. How were you going to maintain social distancing to the extent possible? And I think it's important to note that DHEC understands that you cannot maintain 6 feet all day long in a school. And so they wrote that directive with flexibility that I find is being used in different ways in different districts. But you do have that flexibility to sit closer together with masks, and now we know with plexiglass that adds to that to the safety of the environment. Hand hygiene, what you're doing there, how you're going to clean your buildings, how you're going to contact trace. So those kinds of things as far as how the mitigation tools that you would use. Instructionally, we wanted to be sure that you were able to offer a high quality instruction model to your students both face-to-face and virtually. And I think that is a key tool that everyone needs to be reviewing, because we are hearing of some instances where maybe the computers haven't arrived, or maybe the families don't have good internet access even after what we've done. So I've asked districts to, if that is the case, you really need to push and set that as a high priority to get those children back in the building for face-to-face. And they need to also, another top priority is how are you going to be delivering your state and federal required services to our students with special needs, our struggling students. How are you going to support them? And if there's any group of students that you need to serve as your first group, if you're breaking this down to bring them back in groups, that's the first group you need to be sure that you bring back in or have some plan for how are you delivering those very special services. Many are very difficult to do outside the school building. So we know it's a tough task, but we have most of our districts, I think, are doing a really good job with that. And then you have other student populations, language, second language, English as second language learners, that it's very difficult to serve those students virtually. So I think you can have a district plan, but you really have to tailor it to the specific needs of the students in your district and make sure those that have extra needs are being well served. And if they're not virtually, then you need to come up with a way to get them back in face-to-face. Did I leave out anything?
No, Molly, I would just add that over the past couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of superintendents about their reentry plans. And the places that have moved back into some degree of face-to-face, those that are having the greatest success are those that are following the protocols. They have protocols in place, and they're being very strategic with those protocols and making sure that they're followed, and so it minimizes any problems. So.
Yeah, and I was really encouraged. We just recently met with all the district superintendents and had a chance for them to talk about how it's going. What are the good things that are working and not, and that was the first thing they said, how compliant the students are and wearing their mask and social distancing. In fact, they said if they have to remind anybody, it's usually the adults, it's not the kids. So you can set up a very safe environment. School is, it's kind of like school buses. I tell folks the safest way to get to school is in a bus. I think probably one of the safest places to be right now, other than your home, is probably at school because of all the mitigation protocols that schools have in place. You should do the next one.
The next question. Should size and condition of facilities and number of teachers and staff available to work also be considered? Absolutely. And those things have to be looked at very carefully, and considering the square footage of the facility, as well as the number of students and teachers and staff that are available to provide both face-to-face and hybrid. And we know that when we're providing multiple platforms in a face-to-face environment and a virtual environment, it all doesn't even out. It doesn't all divide equally. And so districts have to look carefully at where the classroom teachers and the student counts are key, and where they can serve those students best. They should also consider the number of bus drivers they have, and the availability of those bus drivers, the availability of food service workers, the custodians that are available, because it's those support staff that are going to help folks follow those protocols that are going to be so important, and as we move back to face-to-face. But also, do you have the staff that's adequate to teach that remote virtual instruction? Right. And what considerations are you given to that? We're good at the face-to-face instruction. The virtual instruction is a little bit new to us. And so making sure that we have followed looking at the numbers of teachers that are willing to teach in that virtual instruction is extremely important. So it goes beyond a lot of things, just the typical reopening plans, but considering the space, the size of the building, being able to staff adequately, being able to make sure you can social distance, making sure that the support staff is there and available to provide the services, because it's going to take everybody, right, all staff, right, to provide the instruction and right, the curriculum that we need.
And I think in the areas that it's working really well, the administrators have been very sensitive to which teachers want to come back, that feel comfortable, and same with families. And I've heard from some superintendents who have been back now for several weeks that they're having more families. They wanted to watch it a little bit. They were a little standoffish. They didn't sign up to come back first, as some teachers didn't. But as they see how well it's working and safe the environment is, more people are wanting to come back.
And I think one key thing here too is the flexibility that you've allowed for the districts to consider as they're looking at the numbers that they bring back, because as I said earlier, it doesn't always equal out.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be flexible enough to accommodate on both sides, face-to-face and virtual.
And not all teachers necessarily will be back in their same building, or maybe even teaching the same group of children. There are lots of strategies that folks are using to make this work. But flexibility is the key, and working with the people who are willing to try this. So our next question, how often should a school district review its plan, and what factors should it use to determine if the district should expand its schooling options for students and parents? For example, when the county of a school district goes from a rating of high to moderate or moderate to low. And so I think that's probably the indicator that most people are watching. And it comes out weekly. That information comes out by county from DHEC, and it can change from one week to the other. Generally, I haven't seen any really jump from high to low, but that medium to high. And you can look at within the actual category, there are ranges there. You can look at the percentages to see just how high are you, how low are you. I would say it's almost it's a constant watching it, but I would not be too affected by just 1 week change. In fact, it's really been interesting to watch this. We have districts in the state who have been at high spread for the entire time and have been back face to face for all students, and it's gone really well. That's kind of the outlier, but there are many who chose, their community supported it. They used the social distancing 6 feet to the extent possible, and it's working well. So, we can supply those names for folks if they want to call those districts and talk with them. But I think that you really should be looking at your plan about every 2 weeks and keeping in touch with your families, the parental choice, working with these families, because they're learning too. They may have signed up for virtual, and for one child it may be working pretty well, and another child is a disaster. And so you have to take that into account and work with those families, and I believe try to get everyone as happy as possible and being served to the extent possible successfully that they can. It's certainly not that old cliche that's overused, one size fits all, but this is true for communities, for schools, and for families, and for each child. There have been some pretty horror stories of folks who signed up virtually and it is not working well. And I cannot defend leaving it that way. We need to be trying to change and offer another option for those families.
Exactly, and I think as we look at this, often in the school business, we look at make decisions about students based on multiple sources of data. It's the same thing here. As we look to make those decisions as we reopen and how we can move from virtual to face-to-face, looking at multiple sources of data to make those decisions. And a lot of that is the things we've talked about. Do you have the staff available? Do you have the protocols in place? Do you have the technology resources and just resources that you need to make that happen? But I also think that in communication to the stakeholders is extremely important. And when there's a change, giving the family a runway of time so that they can adjust to make the changes that they need to adjust.
And I know different communities have been affected in different ways. Our African American community, Hispanic community have really been hit hard by this virus. It affects them worse if they have the infection. So we have to be sensitive to that, and I think with that, though, we also have to show them in a way that you can return safely. It is working, so starting slow, getting it going with a small group of folks, and show just how well this works, much better than I think any of us thought it would, with students and our faculty being so compliant.
And I think some of the districts, as we talk about those that have had great success, have started and built the confidence, especially in their faculty and in their teachers, that this can be done. That's a key piece of what we're about.
So about every 2 weeks for sure, and keep close touch with how it's going with families, and try to adjust and meet those needs that y'all are hearing about. You can address specific families or specific schools. Doesn't have to be done the same way all across the district. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. What's the next question?
The next question is, what is the State Department of Education's role in reviewing district plans, and what factors does it consider in encouraging districts to begin expanding its school options for students and parents? The department reviewed and approved all of the reopening plans for each school district, and special attention was given to how the district could meet the state and federal requirements for those students who needed accommodations, who had individual education plans, we call IEPs, making sure that services were continuing for our English language learners. And so it looked at a multitude of things, the platform that they would offer for their students, virtual, face-to-face, hybrid. And in doing that, can you meet the needs of our most vulnerable population and do it effectively?
Right.
That was a key look for us as we read those plans, making sure that all services to students were available.
That's right. Our next question, is the State Department working with the Department of Health and Environmental Control, DHEC, to ensure the factors it uses to review its recommendations to school districts meet health and safety guidelines. Yes, we are. They've become our best friends, and if there's a joy that's come out of the pandemic, it's getting to know those folks that you've seen on TV, our leaders, Dr. Bell, Dr. Traxler, and the other members of the staff. They meet on a daily basis. We give them our questions. We hear from you all, from superintendents, and then we go to them with the questions, suggestions. So we've developed a very close relationship with them, and really making sure if we don't do it initially, we step back. Even right now with some of the PPE we're ordering, some of the plexiglass, we're going back and looking with them to make sure it's going to meet their approval. I think everyone needs to understand that we're learning. We didn't know much at all. In fact, I kind of laugh about it. Back in March, I remember when a superintendent called me and said, "What do we do? We've got this parent that showed up at school with a mask on. What do we do?" And that was 6 months ago. So things have changed. We've learned a lot. And so same thing here. As we're moving through this, we're learning from the research, we're learning from trying things, and working very closely with DHEC as they too are getting new information to advise us. So it's a very close collaborative, and each week we send out the latest updates from DHEC to superintendents. They generally get that information on Tuesdays, so that we can keep everybody informed.
Our next question: does pressure by some state leaders to mandate all districts provides all students with face-to-face instruction 5 days a week impact how you and the State Department of Education encourage school districts? The only influential factor in the agency's decision is really what is the best interest of our students. What decisions can we make for our students that is best for them? And when we think of the students first and what's in their best interests, we can't go wrong. So it spurs us to make sure that the services, the programs, the platforms that we offer are the best for our students. While the pandemic has been a challenge, it's provided us opportunities. I think it's reminded us of how personalized we need to make our instruction for our students, and how we need to deliver that to them, and how can we best provide that instruction for our students. I think I've often said I think we'll come out of this different. I think we'll come out of this stronger. I think we'll come out of this being providing better services and more effective instruction to our students. So to me, it's the best interest of our students.
Yeah. Finally, the General Assembly has authorized the SCDE to expend all remaining CARES Act funds allocated in June for personal protection equipment for school districts and other coronavirus response needs. When PPE and funding is available for school districts, how can they receive these funds? We sent out a memo just in the last 24 hours. We met with superintendents on the same day we were recording this, so the information is out there for districts to let us know what they need. We'll be doing very similar with technology. The trick on this one is, though, and I think it gets kind of confusing, this is a huge pot of money that came down to the state, almost $2 billion, that we were very fortunate to get some of it. We didn't have to. And it has to be spent by December 31st. The districts also are receiving funding that came from the U.S. Department of Education through us that they will have. We call that the ESSR funds, and those can be spent over 2 years. So obviously we want to try to spend this first big pot by December 31st on as much as we possibly can, and then districts pick up other needs that they may have with their own funding. So it's tricky. It's going to be very, very difficult. We're spending, of that funding, we know now we're going to be spending about $30 million in PPE, meeting all district requests. We worked on an individual basis with districts to provide protective equipment in order to support those districts. There are districts who are getting back to face-to-face, and if they need something, they know to call us, and we will put them at top priority so that they'll have the plexiglass and whatever material that they need. I want no one to use PPE or equipment as an excuse to say we can't go back because we don't have this. We have the funding, and all they need to do is ask, and we will get that out to them. So it's been a real treat to speak with you today. I hope we've covered your questions adequately. If you think of other things that you want to ask us about your school board association, contact Debbie and Scott. They know how to get in touch with us, or call me. Many of you email me, or call David or email us. But thank you for your service to your community, and best wishes for a very safe school year.